What is up, Sleep Tribe? Welcome to a brand new episode of the Healthy Sleep Revolution podcast. I am your host, Dr. Meghna Dassani. It's been a minute since I've been on, haven't I? Well, we took a little bit of a break, a breather for summer. As most of you know, I dropped a kid off at college. I'm kind of sort of still recovering from that. But then I also like to think I waited because we have some amazing guests coming up. And one of my new favorite human beings, or at least from what I've seen on Instagram, is our guest today. And I know I'm going to butcher his name. And I've tried, but it's the same with my name. A lot of people we can't pronounce it. So welcome to Merijn. Did I say that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Awesome. So welcome to the show. And it's a bright and sunny Friday morning for me here in Texas, and he is in the Netherlands. So it's afternoon for him. So good afternoon. How's the weather for you?
Actually, it's quite sunny at the moment, but it has been very bad the last couple of days. But in Holland, I mean, everyone who goes to Holland or to the Netherlands says the weather is very unpredictable. But now it's sunny, so that's a good thing.
There you go. I'm sure you'll take your weather over the 105-degree weather we have in Texas. So no, thank you. Awesome. So you are a sleep scientist, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And you have a PhD in sleep and psychological factors around it. Tell me a little bit more about that. How did you get into it? What's your journey been into the world of sleep?
Yeah, well, I started off as a psychologist. So I treated anxiety problems, depression. And what I found out was that a lot of people who experience psychological problems, psychiatric problems, also suffer from sleep problems. So, and then I found a center for sleep medicine, Kempenhagen, which is in Holland, and I just decided to want to work there. And what I did was I learned a lot about sleep during my work there. I worked there for like 10 years. And the thing was that around the same time that I was working as a psychologist, I also had sleep problems myself. So I suffered from insomnia, and that lasted for like 3 years. And because I felt the urgency to really help other people not to experience the same, I also wanted to do a PhD to see whether I could help people more that suffered from insomnia. So that's how I got into my PhD. And yeah, so I did my PhD, and from there on, I went to work at an education for general medicine, and that's where I am a deputy head right now. But I never really lost touch with sleep. So a couple of years ago, there was it's called the University of Holland, and it's like a TED Talk, and they do kind of TED Talks, and this was around sleep. And they asked me, do you want to say anything about sleep during the TED Talk? And I said, yes. What I really would like to address is how people can sleep better, and you have like 10 to 12 minutes to talk about it. And I thought, well, if I have a couple of thousand views, that's okay. But it really went berserk. So there were like a lot of people watching. I think it's like 500,000 Dutch people now who have watched it. And from there on, I got a lot of questions. Can you talk for psychiatrists, psychologists? And I also wrote a book in Dutch. It's called Sleeping Like a Caveman, and in Dutch it's Slapen als een oermens. And it also addresses the evolutionary perspective, because that's what I'm really interested in around sleep. So that's a bit of my...
So that's a great segue, because I've been biting my tongue to ask you this question. Like, tell me, and I know you struggled with insomnia. Tell me this relationship between evolution and insomnia, and how all of that ties in for us as human beings.
Yeah, I think the modern human being is very preoccupied with getting good sleep and getting enough sleep. And I think there's a very big focus on getting 8 hours of sleep, because that's the message that we get from early on, from our youth. And I think that what happens is that sometimes people really want to have those 8 hours of sleep, and especially when sleep is is not going very well, and that really gives a lot of stress to people. So people really want to have this optimal amount of sleep, while there are a lot of differences between people, and some people need like 6 hours, some people need 9 hours. And I think around food, we have another view, because you're not saying like everybody has to eat 4,000 calories, but in sleep we say everybody has to sleep 8 hours. And I think that's a big thing that you see in modern society. And what you see if you look at evolution, then and you look at, for example, the Hadza tribe, which is a tribe in Africa, who are hunter-gatherers, and they did research on this tribe to see whether how they coped with bad sleep, like sleep problems. And they found out that these people did not even have a word for insomnia, because when you can't sleep, then that is very good, because you can take care of the other people in the tribe during the night, if there is threats, or if there are signals of threat. So they found out that these people sleep around 6 to 6.5 hours, which is much shorter than what we often want to do, and that being awake during the night is not really a problem. So if you look at these people, then they have a very different way of approaching sleep.
That's amazing. Does food and diet play a role in all of this? Has this something that you've like looked into or dove into?
Well, food and diet in general plays a very important part in sleep, because what you eat can really influence your sleep. So if you eat less carbs and more protein, then there is research that people who do that sleep better. But also, if you eat too much fatty food in the late evening, then that can really have a negative influence on your sleep. So food and sleep have different associations. What we also see is that people who really have difficulty sleeping, that they make more bad choices in food. So they eat more fatty foods and they eat more unhealthy products. Yeah.
It's more like, I can't sleep. Let me grab a bag of chips while I'm watching Netflix, or
Yeah, I'm tired. I need to eat. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So not only is it what we eat, but when we eat it is important, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Awesome. Awesome. So what, in your opinion, and in all the research and your studying that you've done, is the biggest misunderstanding around sleep right now?
Well, I think the biggest misunderstanding is that a lot of people think that if you relax enough, that that is enough to get a good sleep, because there are several different other mechanisms that can really influence sleep and have a very important role in sleep. And one of those mechanisms is sleep pressure. And sleep pressure has to do with adenosine. The last couple of years, there's been a lot of research on adenosine, and also on how improving sleep pressure or enhancing sleep pressure can really have a very positive impact on your sleep. And let me talk about sleep pressure a bit, because it has to do with, sleep pressure is like hunger. So the longer you're out of the bed, the more sleep pressure you get. And what a lot of people with insomnia do is they have longer bedtimes because they want to sleep more, which is very logical. But if you look at the physical perspective, then that's not the best way to go. So actually, the best thing a lot of people could do is to take shorter bedtimes if they're suffering from insomnia, because then the sleep pressure builds up more and the adenosine builds up more in the brain, and then people have less difficulty falling asleep and maintaining sleep. So this is one of the things that has had a little bit less attention in the media and in all other sources if you look at sleep.
Okay, so basically, if you can't fall asleep, don't stay in bed trying to, like, maybe sleep's gonna come. Get up, do something, maybe decrease that time in bed until you're actually sleepy, and then get back into bed so you can fall asleep, right?
Yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. Such a great tip. The work that you do, is it mostly with adults, or do you work with children as well? Are there any differences that you've noticed or that you could share in sleep and insomnia as we see it in adults versus kids?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between adults and adolescents. So what I see a lot in adolescents is that there are more problems with the biological clock, which is actually, it's quite normal, because usually in adolescence people have a phase shift in their biological clock, and they fall asleep about an hour, 1.5 later, but also have more difficulty getting out of the bed in the morning. So especially during adolescence, you see different problems around sleep, which have to do a lot with the biological clock, but also with depriving themselves from sleep. So I think in adolescence, these are the only group, this is the only group, if you look at the past 25, 30 years, that has had less sleep. So if you look at the adolescents now, they sleep less than they did 25 to 30 years ago, while adults still sleep the same. They sleep a bit more worse. What you see is that adults sleep worse than 25, 30 years ago, but adolescents sleep less. So that's a big difference. And that's because I think it has to do a lot with the use of the mobile phone and the use of the media, the social media, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Do you recognize?
Yeah, I was smiling as you were saying that because I'm going, I know I'm constantly telling my own girls to like put the phone down, and
Yeah.
because God forbid something happened on Instagram or TikTok in the 5 minutes that you
Yeah.
put your phone down and you miss out on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So by way of like how can we help our kids get to better quality sleep, in your opinion? I know, yes, taking the phone away for sure. But is there anything else that we can implement or integrate to, because school start timings don't help either, right? As you said, their biological clocks are shifting and now they're going to bed later. But mine was out of the house at 6 a.m. this morning. So I know they don't get enough sleep. What can we do to help them with this?
I think it's very important to talk with them. First of all, to really address the importance of sleep and the importance of sleep and how they feel during the day. Because, being tired and not feeling well and feeling down or a bit depressed, that's not okay. And poor sleep can really add to that. So I think it's a very good thing to have a talk about that, and also about how they see it themselves. And then I think it's very important to make agreements on what to do around sleep. Because if you have like an adolescent who wants to go out during the weekend, and I think that's okay, but then you also have to look at the things they can change to improve the sleep during the week. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things you can change is to not use the mobile phone like 1.5 to 2 hours before going to bed.
You might as well cut their right arm off if you tell them
Yeah,
don't.
I know it's very difficult, but those are things that can add to so much better sleep. Yeah, and to not engage in too active activities like 1.5 to 2 hours before going to sleep, like gaming or that kind of stuff. But then also on the other hand, to really give them things like going out on the weekend and maybe staying in the bed for a little bit longer during the weekend, not too long, but that, I think you can really talk about that. I really come to an agreement. Yeah.
That's great. In your work in insomnia, what place does melatonin have in your opinion? Is that something what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a shift. There's been a shift in the Netherlands when you talk about melatonin, because in the Netherlands, it's still over-the-counter medicine, so you can get it like in general drugstores. But what we see is that the last year, especially, there have been a lot of experts who agreed on the fact that melatonin actually in Holland has to be a medicine, and that it's not given over the counter, and that you have to have a good indication for melatonin, because if you use it in an incorrect way, then it can really pose more problems to your sleep instead of helping. And what we see in practice is that there are a lot of parents who buy melatonin and then really give it in a wrong way, and sometimes for the wrong indication, and then the children have more problems sleeping, and that's a bad thing. So I think that good education about it, and also a little bit of regulation when it comes to melatonin, is very important.
That's great. That is great. I think we need some of that to happen here as well.
Mm.
As we start to wrap up, what are your top 3 tips for anybody, be it parents, be it somebody like me, that may be struggling with insomnia or sleep in general? What are your top recommendations?
Yeah, I think the 3 tips have to do with the 3 main areas that can influence sleep. The first one has to do with circumstances. We've talked about some circumstances like the mobile phone, but also getting into the light during the day, like a lot of light exposition during the day and less light in the evening is very important. There's been a thing about caffeine, because there's been a lot of research on caffeine also in the Netherlands, which says that a lot of people actually are not that sensitive to caffeine. So, but I think still, if you're working with sleep, also look at the things you take. Like I would recommend people who have insomnia to not use caffeine in the evening, although it might not have that big effect that you would expect. But also not to do exercise like 1.5 to 2 hours before going to bed. So those are circumstances, and really keep a regular schedule. Then the second one would be the sleep pressure that we've talked about. So not staying too long in the bed, and maybe shortening bedtime for a couple of weeks. And usually it takes like 2 weeks to 3 weeks before it works. But you see like in 80% of all people who do sleep restriction, that it really has effect. So that's a good thing. And also exercise, because exercise can also enhance your adenosine production. And then the third one would be relaxation, because we've talked about the Hadza tribe and we've talked about people who are awake during the night. But the thing is that if you're stressed out because of your work or you're doing too much, then your brain goes into an alertness. And so it's very common to, when you're alert, that your body gives more priority to staying awake instead of being asleep, because you have to see whether there's something wrong in the environment and check the environment. So a lot of people come to me and they say, well, I'm stressed out, I have a burnout or other problems, and I can't sleep, but I'm so tired. And I usually say that if you're stressed out, then the body is too alert and the brain does not want to sleep. So it's also important to look at stress. That's a third factor.
That is amazing. Some really good points for our listeners. If there's anything that's resonated with y'all, drop it in our comments, or better still, drop him or me a note on Instagram. And that leads me to, how can people find you? How can people work with you? How can people follow you, get more information? What is the best way?
The best way internationally is to look at my Instagram profile. It's Dr. Slaap, and Slaap is a Dutch word for sleep. And you spell it DRSLAAP. Yeah, so you can find me there.
Okay, and for those that are tuned in, he does have some amazing content. That's actually how we connected, was through Instagram, and lots of good info that he's dropping constantly. Personally, for me, I'll tell you this, and yes, even though I knew it, just listening to it from an expert, is the tip about insomnia, where if you are having a hard time falling asleep, don't stay in bed and don't go pull up Netflix and grab a bowl of ice cream. Like, get out of bed, let that sleep pressure build up so you can actually go into bed wanting to fall asleep. I think I'm going to try that the next time I have a hard time falling asleep. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day.
Thank you.
To chat with us. It truly was my pleasure. For our listeners, we will have all of his information in the show notes. We'll have his Instagram handle. Go follow him. There's a lot to learn. He has a lot of knowledge that he drops. I will see everybody next time. Thank you.
Thank you.